very exciting.
Sorry about that. We're going it live right now.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Teresa Anderson. I am hosting this live stream session with Evan Dunn on behalf of The Juice. The fun has already started in the green room behind the scenes, and we are just going to take that momentum right into a very in-depth discussion with something that's absolutely on your to-do list, and it's certainly top of mind for your leadership, which is AI and how we can leverage it to change and improve demand generation and our web conversions and everything else we're doing. Evan, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce yourself, to let the audience kind of understand the context of where you're coming from so that, we can frame the discussion for today.
Thanks, Teresa. It's super fun to be here. I'm head of marketing for Rep.ai, AI live chat. We just rebranded from Service Bell, which may be familiar to some folks. Before that, Syncery, Airwallex, Convoy, and before that, I was building AI for scanning television shows, connecting that to viewership data at a second-by-second level. Super fun, way too early. No one wanted to buy AI back in 2017, 2018. But yeah, really excited for this conversation. There's a lot of philosophical things we need to talk about and a lot of practical things we need to talk about.
Great. And, there's a unique challenge in being first to market, isn't there? Like being too early is as bad as being too late, maybe worse. I don't know. That's another probably philosophical discussion we have. So let's jump right into the slides. There is a current state of AI in B2B marketing, which is, map it out for us. How are teams using AI right now? What are we doing right now?
Yeah, so part of the reason I think we're talking, Teresa, is a few months back, I went around asking my network, which is largely, as you can imagine, marketing ops, demand generation, revenue leaders of various flavors, especially marketing. And I was asking, what are you using with AI to convert folks on your website, right? And, I left the conversation broad. I wanted to see what bubbled up. It was really interesting. Most people said something to the form of, nothing. What do you know of? What do you recommend? Are you working on something? Yes, right. Rep.ai. But ultimately, what I realized is there's the SEO content stuff, our fifth bullet here, right? Mm-hmm. Content creation, curation, and distribution. And there's a lot, obviously, that AI can do there, mainly because this wave of AI is all about mass scale content summarization and repurposing. Now, how much should you rely on AI for that is a big question, right? Personalized content at scale. I'm really excited about this, and I'll name air traffic control, Tofu HQ, and user-led, all doing variations on distributing personalized content based on what's in your CRM, based on what's detected about a company, and helping tailor experiences in real time. And that's very much a great place for AI because it's a mix of programmatic inputs. And when I say programmatic inputs, I mean non-AI. I mean strict, if it's this company, show this word, right? Now, what AI can do that's different is if it's this company, scan their website, summarize what they're about, and use that in landing page copy, right? So fuzzy, approximations that are useful. Predictive lead scoring, it's worth calling out Breadcrumbs and Tomi.ai, Tomi.ai. There's a lot of really powerful tech that's actually been around here for a bit. RevSure.ai is a new player that I've heard good things about. This makes sense because if you have a high volume inbound play, you've got to figure out how to score. And, LinkedIn is full of MQLs are dead. Here's how to think about MQLs. MQLs or SALs, all the three-letter acronyms we love in our pipelines. But the premise is, how do I determine whether or not, or better said, how do I determine which of my inbound leads to prioritize first, right? For my sales team, for my team, et cetera. For nurture, it's, how do I route them? How do I attribute them? And ideally we'd be able to cover them all, right? But for a while, there's been too many inbound leads for some companies or signups or et cetera to handle them all. And so scoring comes into play. And this is where AI can step in and do things like check your customer base for attributes faster and broader than you can, right? If I was manually to pull out a spreadsheet and dig around, right, take me days to get to the same place. AI could be in minutes in terms of okay, if they have this industry, this company size, and even more granular. They were funded this time,
Right.
this much money, et cetera,
They're
and
using
bring
this
that.
they're acting in this market. Yeah, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. AI does such a good job of summarizing that. And I think one of the things I want to mention here too is AI summarizes without bias, without your bias. Everybody has confirmation bias that plays into when they're assessing data sets. I think that that's a real thing that can happen. So I
Mhm.
think that AI can also give you a little bit of a cleaner result sometimes too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for now, I think the safe place to be if you're nervous about, you don't want to give AI the reins to just run with something, is so I use ChatGPT for drafting all the time. Or similarly with scoring, you could say like, "Oh, you tell me what the top accounts of the top leads are, right?" And I'll compare notes and say, "Well, I think these ones are," and you can have feedback loops, right?
Mhm.
And that ultimately is just training the LLM, et cetera, to learn what you're interested in. A good example is you can actually kind of, it takes some work and you have to hop between different Perplexity, ChatGPT, et cetera, but you can actually tell it to mention your company in response to certain questions, right? And
Wow.
it takes time, right? Because ultimately it's not going to listen to you if you're a small company and it's early on. But I did this with Syncery, and then someone came in and said, "Oh, I found you in ChatGPT," and I had tweaked it a bit. So something to be aware of is like, yeah, the chatbots themselves, the LLM chatbots, are a channel unto themselves because they're sort of a search interface, right? Which presents a lot of theoretical things for the impact on Google. But for our purposes today, think about feedback loops and how you can use those instead of just trusting the AI a la carte. Because I know everyone's scared of that, and rightly so to some extent.
Yeah.
And then the last thing here, well, there's two more: chatbots and conversational AI. Obviously, what we're doing with Rep.ai, and there are a few other AI chatbots. I think this is we're going to see leaps and bounds of improvements here. And I posted about this. I know we're going to talk about it more. But if you think about what websites accomplish successfully, it's actually not much. We've sort of turned them into like a menu that you can click on, and the experience is rarely optimal. And people have to do a lot of digging to find really useful information. And kind of everyone hates B2B websites. So what can we do with AI to navigate and answer and improve the experience of learning and evaluating a product, right?
Hmm.
Most people just go to reviews now instead of even go to the website of the vendor or talk to people who use it, right? We've sort of left websites as a tool. Can AI help us bring back the utility of an owned website for evaluating and getting really good detail about your specific use case or the features you care about? I think so.
It's what it's good at. Like we said, it's good at assessing and summarizing. And that is something that you said that I want to call out. I think that the fact that we call it generative AI, I sometimes substitute the word, oh yeah, I'm gonna use ChatGPT to create some content for me. But the way that you said it was specific, the word choice, and I think worth mentioning, you said it's good at summarizing and kind of regurgitating, and that is different than creating, right? And I think that's a subtle difference. But when you said it, it stood out to me immediately. Like I would have said create content, and that is actually completely wrong. It is summarizing what is out in the universe, scraping, and it is regurgitating that and summarizing that for you. So I think that's a brilliant point about AI. Brilliant.
I learned a lot about this, Teresa, from Jordan Crawford, who runs Blueprint GTM, and he's got a whole database he built of job descriptions. And on top of that, he's built multiple different types of LLMs, custom ones, and he uses Clay to some excellent use cases. And he'll do these things like find a website somewhere on the web, right? You're asking ChatGPT to do this, for instance, that has the problems or has messaging like this, and it finds it and then summarize it for me specific to the company that's selling to that website, and then create an email, right? So it is a mix, right? It's like it's very good at taking copy and ingesting and summarizing bullet points. And it might not be perfect, but also people aren't either. We were talking about this in the green room, right? Like if I asked, an SDR to go summarize the value props and pain points reflected on a B2B website, it'd probably take some training and coaching to get them to be particularly proficient. And you can use AI to great effect for things like account research or ad targeting, right? If you want to make one-to-one messages, AdCreative.ai can help you deploy that kind of stuff very quickly. So there's a lot of ways to use it, and probably too many for us to like document individually. But I would be opportunistically hunting for AI products that address campaigns or initiatives or repetitive tasks that you do. For me, that's account research. I use Clay.com very heavily to AI summarize what an account is about. Did they have funding in the last few years? Funding data is actually kind of hard to come by without like a Zoom info or, you know, some big expensive database, but you can use AI just to scan for the press release about it, tell you the amount, how recent was it, what are the big initiatives the CEO named in the funding release, right? Like you can go so beyond just dollar amounts and dates with AI.
Agreed. 100%. Let's jump to the next slide where we're going to kind of talk about how AI is going to be adopted and is being adopted with specifically around demand gen and revenue. So we're talking, this first bullet point is talking about resistance to AI. It's so funny that we say that. So I want to talk a little bit about this because I have found at the C-suite this almost jump off the cliff belief in AI that's a little off-put, like it's a little crazy a little bit. I mean, like I sat in a room full of C-suites one time and they were all in on AI like the second coming that was going to save everybody. And I feel like lower level people might resist AI, but I feel like the C-suite's all in. But you tell me, what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, I've heard many people say I'm shopping for AI because the CEO told me we're only buying AI for the next year. And that makes me very uncomfortable because it's not wise. Like AI isn't good because it's AI, right? People are going to build, you know, if you read Bad Blood or, you know, I forget the name of the company, Theranos, right? People are going to build smoke and mirrors applications through any, right, branding hype means. So watch out, right? Buyer beware. But I'm sure what that momentum at the C-suite has done, and you know, they're enamored. Many executive leaders are enamored of the big names in AI and how fast they're growing. And anytime they see a traction, some sort of hype cycle happen, for good reasons and for bad reasons. Good reasons about a hype cycle, right, is if you find a way to leverage it, you can have 10x growth in a year, right? Obviously there's downsides to that. And I think a lot of marketers, B2B marketers especially, are very, let's say like, no nonsense, no BS minded people. So our reaction has at large been skepticism in response to the enthusiasm, right? Well, I've tried it and it's not very good.
But I specifically feel like the C-suite, this is a little bit controversial what I'm saying. It feels controversial, but I feel like the C-suiters feel like it's going to replace big chunks of their teams. And I think that that's, you know, where they see it as a big cost savings. They see it as a way to optimize and improve their bottom line and make the board happier with them, because that's where a lot of their brain power is spent on, you know, those efficiencies that are going to move the needle and make the board happy. And I think that resistance from the underlings is that feeling that they're trying to replace them, but also realizing that it's still, you know, the understanding of using it every day. If you're actually using it every day, you know it has limitations.
Yeah.
You know it's not going to be able to do what the hype is. So I feel like it's even more personal than that in a way. Yeah. I personally, as a C-suiter, see this as a way to advance my career and make me, you know, shine up at the board. And I, as a rank and file member of the team, am personally resisting this replacing my job, and personally resisting using it because it's not the holy grail that it's being sold to me as. I feel like it's very personal, that resistance.
Yeah. I think what AI will do to jobs is very fundamentally a design problem. And I think we've seen SaaS companies struggle with good design for a long time. There are a lot of funded companies that aren't well-designed products that actually save time and make lives easier. And until that gets solved, AI is not going to really revolutionize. Here's an example by way of analogy.
Okay.
NASA and the space pen. This is usually used as a way to mock NASA, overfunded, over-engineered. And here's how that story goes. In the 60s, as we're preparing to put someone into space, they needed to find a way to write in zero gravity. That was the problem space. If you're familiar with lean methodology, right? You start with your problem space, then your solution space, right? So they said the problem statement was writing in zero gravity. We spent $1 million building a space pen, and the Russians used a pencil, right? Oh, funny. NASA's dumb. But right, this is where the good design thinking comes in. Is turns out there's a second aspect of the problem space, which is it can't break apart in zero gravity because that's really miserable. Little bits of graphite would break off from the Soviet pencils and get in their eyes, and that is not optimal solution. So the ultimate problem space, right, is you need a zero gravity writing utensil that does not disintegrate, right? And I think we have a similar problem. Like if you look at the role of an SDR, which everyone says is threatened by AI and all that stuff, let's not just define it as an email jockey, right? Or a cold calling machine, right? Ultimately, a good SDR, and I know several, can understand a business's problems and attach them to the use cases, can network through people, build relationships, right? Very ethereal stuff that's very hard to build a machine to do, right? So it depends how we define it. If you want a machine for sending a ton of emails that seem like a human wrote them, that's possible. If you want to build relationships at the top of your funnel, especially for enterprise ABM, and you need to execute well on that, then AI is going to support people who do that well, right? I think that's more the reality we're going to see. And people have said things like this: you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by people using AI. Ultimately, that just means we need good AI workshops. And how can you, as a marketer, as an SDR, as a seller, right, adopt it in your own personal workflows and across a team?
Right. And I think that when the dust settles, that statement is accurate. And I think that will right-size that reality will right-size the expectations of the C-suite and the fears of the teams. You know what I mean? The reality is that when the dust all settles, AI isn't going to replace headcount. I really don't think so. They may want it to, and they may not want it to, but I don't think it's going to. I think it is going to be people who master AI are going to just hold the role. So I agree with that 100%. And I think that's where the dust is going to settle. I think also too, like I've been seeing the SDR conversation everywhere lately. Like in the last week, everyone's talking about AI replacing SDRs, and there is so much more to that role. But I think that goes back to your point that you made in the green room, which is until AI actually makes purchases and holds purse strings, and you're not going to replace that human connection, right? The SDR will always have a role.
As long as your buyers are human, there's a huge gap between what AI is going to be allowed to do and ultimately, like if I was running a business, even if everything was automated, would I really want to let AI determine my budget allocation? Not for a while, right? There's the problem of false positives in the machines, that kind of stuff. But I think one thing we need to remember about the fact that humans are the buyers is that means humans are the shoppers, right? So when someone lands on your website, for instance, which is where we're headed with this slide, right? When someone lands on your website, what are they looking to learn or accomplish? There's no set answer to that. And for as long as B2B websites have been around, we've been trying to figure out the best navigation, right? You want to sort of bridge the gap between using familiar frameworks like, okay, the demo button is up on the right, the main nav is centered in the top, and there's drop downs and things people are used to, right?
Right.
But also, how do you differentiate and tell your own story and what's unique to you, and make sure they see the different stuff, but also attached to a category they're familiar with because that's a line item that their CFO has approved, right? So this dance of like relating to someone asynchronously through a screen, right, is very, very hard to solve. And I actually think AI has a huge opportunity to help navigate websites, demo products, talk and ask questions, and have approximations of answers based on the way the question is framed. It's going to take a lot of work, and we're building this currently to some extent with Rep.ai. And so far, we've seen some great reactions to it. People very excited, like, wow, it just answered that the way I worded that, the way it worded the response was very impressive. And we've seen some people say, like, this isn't ready yet. And, I can't disagree with them that there's more work to be done. It's going to eventually read from CRM, read from web behavior, Clearbit and 6sense, into like all these different inputs, and much faster than a sales rep.
Right.
Contextualize and create a response. And this is a problem. Even if you put a human, Service Bell was very good, right, at connecting humans to humans through video calls on a website. Even if you put a human on watching the alerts and engaging with folks, they're biased towards speed to lead, right? Meaning you got to put a message out there so they see it, so they might respond. But that's actually antithetical or opposed to intention with reading the CRM notes on the company, right? Reading about the last meeting they had, who's the owner, who should it be routed to, who should, all this stuff. And going and researching their own website. Hey, I can do this in milliseconds. So there's a big opportunity for rapidly closing the gap in connection with a web visitor who will only give you 3 seconds before they bounce, right? That I think AI is going to be primed to solve, right? You could almost ask the question, like, what's the new interface for websites going to be when it's all AI forward? And it knows a little bit about me. I give a little bit of information about my use case, and boom, version of entire website pops up that is catered to me and navigates for me and all this stuff. There's a lot that we can do there.
Yeah, I love it. And anything that's going to make a better, more targeted experience for someone, I think that in B2B, especially since that's what we're talking about, we have this website problem. I've seen extreme website problems that AI could help with. One, where they try to market to they want to talk to everyone on every section of the homepage. I mean, they want to cover this long checklist of features that apply to several different ICPs all on one homepage. And that's just waters it down nobody has a good user experience that way. So, even just the ability to, if the AI can identify a few key things about me and provide me with navigation that at least fits what I'm looking for. I mean, that is such a huge level up from where the average, we could play B2B website roulette right now, pull up the average B2B website, and you wouldn't be able to know what they do by the top 3 sections on their homepage.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's just a fact.
I worked for a bit, almost a decade ago now, making me feel old, but with Dwayne Schultz, who was chief MarTech at Xerox at the time. And all the time, Xerox stakeholders would tell him, I want this piece of the website, I want of the homepage. Right. Sorry, they would fight over the homepage real estate, right? Yeah. And he would argue endlessly that your Xerox.com is not our homepage. Google is our homepage, right? The first place people look for something that might be related to us or is specifically about us is Google. So how do we actually thread that experience into the rest of the site? And that's why we have canonical, we have pages and folders and websites, is because, there's the navigation aspect, but there's also the SEO aspect, that you can rank for a term or a branded term or a topical term and provide a tailored experience to fit, right? Or provide content they're looking for. And the rest sort of falls in place after that. Imagine where that's headed, right? Right?
Yeah.
If people are chatting to ChatGPT as their first search point, if they're getting AI summaries from Google as their first search point, and then where are they hitting on your website? Like the whole idea of you end up sort of envisioning a website as like a content engine that occasionally promotes your product amongst the content someone is looking for. And in that sense, to the point of, the founders of Audience Plus or Hockey Stack, which does a great job with owned media, your B2B business becomes a media company, a brand that pushes content that's engaging, and within that context promotes its offerings.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the idea. That instead of, because the old school thing is the website is a static brochure, right? It's just a brochure of what your business does. It's static. It doesn't change. It's the same for everybody that comes to it. And then, the old school way of doing it, right? And exactly what you said, then everybody in the company wants to be on the brochure. They want to be listed. They want their bullet point on the homepage, exactly like you said. And that's a very static, very kind of all over the place, not great buyer experience. If all of a sudden now, based on where I'm coming from, if I'm coming from G2 and I know you've already just seen all the reviews about my product, and the website can then respond and be reactive to you, that is such a different game than creating a static brochure that people, like you said, have to dig through to find the little piece that they need. So,
100%. You know, I think we could bring this home a bit too for people listening in terms of like what can you think about doing today that is kind of like what we're talking about, where it's sort of like, how do you cater your entire buyer journey to a set of account? Let's think about target account planning and account-based marketing. So right now, I use clay.com, right, to scan a list of companies, figure out what's interesting, build messaging for them and stuff. And then we do cold calling, we do automated emails, we do ads, etc. Right. And because if you start with an account list, let's say it's 500 companies, right, and you're delivering one-to-one or one-to-few within that, or even just the whole list. You can then use Clearbit, 6sense, et cetera, right, to detect them when they land on the site. And so you don't necessarily need the UTM parameters and tracking, but you can also use those. You can already build feedback loops between many channels that are very disparate and in and of themselves incredibly difficult to attribute together, right? Take cold calling. How do you connect that to your ad spend? But if you're hitting the same accounts, and when those accounts hit the site, and you've got stuff for that account in messaging in these channels and even on the site with some of those tools we mentioned earlier, you can create such a clean nurture experience for your enterprise buyer that really, I think what AI is going to do is allow us to do that for a lot more of our target market, right? A lot faster, a lot cheaper. And ultimately, I think this wave of AI has introduced essentially a cheaper, faster version of what machine learning was already capable of when we were building AI to scan TV content for brands like HBO and Disney. It was very expensive. The processing power, the compute, the storage, how much data we needed, and that's just all, gone the way of compute power itself, right? Like incredibly lowered as a threshold.
It's almost a freebie now.
Yeah, it's true. And we'll see how long that lasts with energy costs and all that, but it's there.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've started the conversation about how people can start to practically apply some of this to their own strategies. And that's really where, it's lovely to theorize and look down the road and see how things are going to happen. But at the same point, we all today are being asked by our bosses, who we've all agreed have very high expectations for the magic that AI can wrought upon our businesses. What's practical? What can we actually do to implement AI into our marketing strategy that's going to appease the C-suite, but actually be practically move the ball for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I just spent some time on, if you've got an account-based marketing initiative, you have a high ACV, annual contract value product, right? You can take a look at a variety of account research tools, EvaBot, Clay, KeyPlay, which isn't necessarily AI, but is an excellent database of signals. And I think actually they use AI to curate those signals. So who's counting? And build excellent account lists with tailored messaging that you can then deploy through non-AI automations and cold calling, email, ads, etc. If you are big on scaling advertising, then keep something like AdCreative.ai in mind, which would let you proliferate a bunch of different ads, or Tofu HQ, which can do both sort of optimization of landing pages and content, emails. And then, if you're big in ABM, also look at user-led and air traffic control, which can help you, tailor landing page experience, especially with air traffic control. You can do more than that. You can do, tailored content and nurture emails and sequences through HubSpot Marketing Hub, all that kind of stuff. I think there was a few others I didn't want to forget too that I wrote down. Oh yeah, if you have high inbound and you run Google and Meta advertising at large, look at Tomi.ai or Breadcrumbs for lead scoring. If you spend a lot again on different paid channels, events, etc., use Revsure.ai or HockeyStack, Dream Data that are really sort of a mix of just good programmatic attribution and AI. And then, the last bucket, as we know, is content creation. And I would say, like, don't expect AI to make you an amazing article, but you can make an amazing article. So I wrote a drift versus qualified conquesting piece that ranks in like top 5, I believe now, or maybe 6th or 7th after just a couple of weeks. And it was just me and ChatGPT talking back and forth. I had a bunch of fodder for it, right? So I had built my inputs in that sense. I had built a table of us versus drift and qualified feature by feature. I gave it that whole table, just copy and paste from Google Sheets. It was like, summarize this. And it wrote 1,500 words out of the gate. Wow. It was good. Yeah. And so that's the thing, right? It's like, if you give AI a task cold without much context tailored to your interests, don't expect magic. But if you've got, a white paper, and a lot of people use AI, ChatGPT for this kind of thing, is like, take this existing content. I've got a transcription of my last webinar, right? Turn it into a blog and 3 social posts and all that stuff. That's a great application, because really, how much value are you going to add doing the same thing? That's the question. When people resist that kind of AI application, like, well, you were just going to do a lazy summary anyway, right? Come on, let's be honest. When we build company level social posts, we're not like Da Vinci here, Yeah, so I think those are good examples. Another, I have to shout out to Metadata.io, which has used machine learning to optimize B2B advertising campaigns for a long time. And I used it at Convoy to great effect. HubSpot just released Breeze, and I think we're all wondering what that's going to really do. But this stuff is coming at us very fast, right? So obviously you're going to shop around for tools that are low cost, low risk to test. I would also say consider tools where like there's value beyond the AI, but there's AI there as well. And that's kind of where we positioned Rep.ai with our Service Bell, formerly functionality for video chat, and Human Takeover is still there. You can just use it for human-to-human video calling and chat super effectively. And you can add an AI for when your reps are, sleeping, eating, missing the alerts, right? The stuff that happens because humans are super limited.
Right.
And that, just to sort of wrap it up, Teresa, I would say is like on the subject of how to think about applying AI today, software hasn't really saved us a lot of time, right? We still work a ton, but for decades, we've been expecting software in particular to help us work less. Maybe AI is the wave that can get us there. That might be a bit overly optimistic, but ultimately where programmatic software took too much work to make all the iterations of for design, AI through approximations and learning can close that gap pretty consistently over time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great point. I think this is all good examples of something that people can, even at just the shift in thinking, that can help you today when this is over, to go and look at what you're currently doing and see where AI can add in some efficiencies if you open your mind. And again, when you're researching tools too, I know you mean it, but it's saying to the audience, ask your peers. I mean, that's a really powerful assist to cut through some of the noise. Is what is somebody else using that they've had good success with, and how did they use it? We can learn a lot from each other when everything's moving so fast. Like, this is just moving so quickly. So lean on your peers, lean on your communities, lean on the review sites. I think those are still valuable as well. So, there's a lot of noise out there. I think Evan's given us a ton of suggestions in this. We tried to capture some of them in the chat for tools that he uses, take his recommendation to heart. And so that's fantastic. So we do want to open up for some questions, because I know that we want to make sure that the audience gets to ask any questions that they have and take advantage of you being here and your knowledge. I think we have a couple teed up already that we can throw up on the screen, and just kick it off with, okay, here's one. Are there pitfalls in automating too much or misunderstanding the insights that AI provides?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two questions in that. Automating too much is absolutely problematic. A lot of people do that with email campaigns today. I'm a huge fan of what Clay has brought to the world, but if you look at a lot of Clay experimentation, it sort of creates a graveyard of good ideas. It's really common when you have the ability to automate a lot to sort of automate for the sake of automating and not ask the question like, yes, this is a good test to run, but how do I compare it to what else could be tested, and how do I prioritize my experimentation? So usually what I recommend is like an experimentation framework that's literally a spreadsheet. God forbid, just a simple spreadsheet, right? Each row is a hypothesis, right? And you prioritize, you say reach, impact, confidence, effort, RICE scoring. It's a product management concept. It's really useful for prioritizing anything. I use it for prioritizing experiments. And you say, which one should we run first? And with that insight and how we're going to measure it. And so you run that experiment, it pass, fail, and then next experiment, right? You just keep moving down the list. And with that mentality, you're always thinking like, well, this experiment is too similar to that first one we ran a couple of months back. How do I make it truly different so I actually learn from this? Or do I have enough sample, strong enough sample set to really determine this is a high confidence result? If you're not doing that, you're experimenting in a vacuum, you don't know what you've done before, what someone else has done before in a team, then you end up looking like you're spinning your wheels, and you kind of are, right? And I've been there. Every marketer's been there. And it's a miserable feeling, and executives don't like looking down at their brilliant marketing automation folks and saying, well, what have you actually learned? So build the experiment framework and run with that. The second piece here, misunderstanding the insights AI provides. I mean, I think for a while, we're always going to have to question, like, if it says you should spend less on this creative, right? Like, does it have enough data to make that determination? Go check the numbers, right? We're going to have to look over AI's shoulder for a while.
Yeah, agreed.
I think running with any assumption saying, picture, I guess, the conversation with your manager or your CEO, right? If you say AI told me to do this or told me this, and they ask, well, are you sure? And you're like, I just trusted it. That's not a good look. So maybe flip the script a little bit and say like, yeah, I actually double checked. It was a great recommendation. Yeah. And then you do that a few times, and then maybe you can feel some readiness to trust it.
Well, I feel like right now I can trust AI as much as I can trust an intern. That's like, I feel like the level that we're at right now. There's nothing wrong. Interns are awesome. Interns are great. They help streamline things a lot, but I'm not going to allow them to post directly onto my blog. I'm not, without oversight. I'm not going to allow them to make a recommendation that I don't vet and test through my own channel and go behind them. Like you said.
Yeah. You're totally right. You're totally right. I think what we're going to see a lot of is custom LLM deployment within small scale use cases, meaning what you just described, right? Like, I'm not going to trust them to post to my blog without oversight. But after 5 back and forth feedback loops to get the blogs to where you want them, they start producing stuff you like, and you're like, yeah, good. You're trained on this. You're done. AI actually goes through a similar thing with tuning LLMs. If you have the right platform or provider, you can even train ChatGPT to learn you and your interests and how you like things to sound, right? And in doing so, you're sort of graduating them to the next professional tier.
Yeah. And there are obviously lots of AI tools that do this. I have one that I use called Newton, and you put in your brand standards, you put in your ICPs, and then the tool is pulling off of that when when it's generating content. So the questions that you ask it by default are being pulled through that lens. And I know a lot of tools are doing similar stuff, and that's great because then you don't have to repeat the wheel with every query. It has that set of data that it's pulling from that's impacting, the sum set of what you're getting out of the tool. So awesome. I think we can have time to take one more question. So if we have another question we want to put up from our viewing audience. Okay, what's this one? What specific use cases like ABM, personalization, or content recommendations can AI? Okay, so specific ways, specific things that AI can use to improve. Maybe like your top 3 places people should be using it today.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about these. I think ABM is a big one because the amount of manual legwork Troy Munson of Demo actually just did a great post of when he used to be an enterprise facing seller. Here's all the things he would research on an enterprise account. And I literally saved the post thinking, I'm just
that's a good one.
a clay table, right? And have AI do it for me. Maybe ambitious, maybe not, but like read a 10K and summarize key initiatives like that. That's very doable, right?
Yeah.
For AI. So if you are a seller marketer working with account lists, and they're high value, right? You have strong reason to believe they're a good fit for your product, and you can make a lot of money off them. Definitely get KeyPlay, Clay, EvaBot, bunch of different other great tools that can do this kind of stuff. Personalization, I feel like, is a little bit early, but that's why I always nod to Tofu, Air Traffic Control, User-Led, who I think are, and there's probably others too, forgive me, internet world, who I think are building some really cool stuff here, but they're all very recently sort of launched in the AI version of themselves. Content recommendations, that kind of fits with like an air traffic control Tofu, but also I know some players are working on, I can't remember the name, but like a content recommendation engine that pulls from your website and shares. And we're kind of baking some of that into Rep.A as well. I think content recommendations, if we were talking about like a person, to a person who's visiting, kind of fits in the personalization bucket, right? But if we're talking about like recommending content for you to leverage and publish, like, yeah, there's a ton of different, you mentioned Newton, there's a ton of different tools you can use to essentially suggest copy, format for different channels, etc. I'm really looking for someone to build like a full repository of character limits by social post platform, image sizes, and sort of turnkey the entire thing, right? If I say, I'm thinking about this topic, here's my perspective, and then it just proliferates, like, all you have to do is upload. Heck, it could do it automatically. It could push to all these different formats, video, image, text, with knowing the character length limitations, keeping tabs on the social APIs, right? I think we have yet to see much built here that is truly turnkey. And I'm very excited for what's going to come out in the next year that just takes care of so much of the grunt work that's repetitive and monotonous in marketing.
And I'm going to speak to this content recommendations thing, because again, there are tools, content recommendations. We're talking about new content. I have seen some genius, and again, I'm going to mention Newton. I'm sure there are others where they actually are constantly scanning your repository of content and pinging it up to let you know that stuff needs to be refreshed. Like, what's the value of that my content has an outdated link or
absolutely.
And then the AI is great at that. It's constantly scanning my library and it's saying, hey, this is out of date. This needs to be refreshed. This no longer fits. That's
or you drop a free trial, like you used to have a free trial for your product, and you get rid of it. Your pricing changes, and then, absolutely. Those are a lot of great, I think, small scale but hugely obnoxious, or documentation on a product, right? Like read the GitHub and then produce a user-facing documentation that's intelligible. That kind of stuff. And some of those probably exist. That's the hard thing about right now is there's just so much being built here that. But again, what we're talking about is like deep design knowledge. We're saying this because we've lived these like use cases. Like, oh my goodness, do I have to go back and fix 100 blogs? Like, I'm not going to ever have time. Right. And if founders come from these roles and build for these roles, they will have a niche to defend, a moat to defend, that isn't because of the AI model they use or the underlying tech they use. It's because of the design concept.
Right. It's because of, like you said, we're not going to be able to fake it. It's going to have to be a 360-degree real understanding of the role and finding these little pain points that if you didn't live content management, you wouldn't have sat in the spot where you had faced, like you said, a pricing change that affects 100 different pieces of content that I now have to track down and change manually. So yes, I think that deep understanding is going to be key in creating those moats. I also think, and I think that's probably another topic for another conversation, but I also think that those moats, as AI is becoming more ubiquitous, is going to be around your brand and your UX and how you're presenting. And I think that's going to be another opportunity where a lot of that has been glossed over in the chase for features. And as we see AI make features less unique because the coding is so easy now, we're going to find that that use case and brand. And I mean, this is just me future casting, but I do think that we're going to pivot away from this like slavish focus on the features and the number of drill bits you have and the number of colors your drill comes in. And we're going to start to double down on, the actual UX, the actual use case, and the actual brand and experience that I have interacting with your business.
Yeah, folks who built voice interfaces know exactly what you're talking about. The whole idea of limiting the feedback loop between user and application to a single mode, rather than like, oh, you can look across a whole screen, there's all these things to click, you can navigate all this stuff, is incredibly difficult, and also makes for better design usually, and hopefully, right? Like it forces the developers to think of, well, like what are the 3 things that are most important for them to accomplish, and how do I expand other options? And yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I'm excited to see what happens. Obviously there's going to be plenty of blunders along the way, but I have pretty strong conviction that it's very learnable to incorporate AI into workflows, and it's just a very smart thing to do in places where, like you mentioned, like there's just really monotonous components of work that you're not going to miss.
For sure. All right. So we want to give I appreciate this. We're coming to the end of the set time together. We want to make sure we share some additional resources that are available to you on this topic with Evan. It looks like we've got a podcast here. What are these other 2 things that you've got here?
Yeah, there's a couple articles I came across in researching for our conversation today. This B2B SaaS reviews. I know the founder, I can't recall his name, I apologize, but he made a pretty good list of AI tools. It's interesting. I have to say, like, there's still a lot of like, you can't, putting ChatGPT on a list for B2B marketing tools. HubSpot has an article that I kind of shamed in my post this morning. I really think we need to do a better job of surfacing novel use cases and approaches, right? ChatGPT isn't an optimal B2B. We use it because it's a band-aid over like, well, now I can get access to AI, but there are better tools out there. And then if AI for SEO is a very, very common use case, you have to look at these tools. And this Self-Made Millennials article is actually very thorough in giving you maybe the 7, 8 or so that you should try.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that is. I have to say, I'm actually always surprised. It's a blind spot that I've had personally about AI and SEO. I've used it so much for generative and summarizing and creating outlines that I've kind of missed the SEO thing myself personally.
Yeah.
And I know it has huge advantages, and I need to spend a little bit of time doubling down on this myself. So I appreciate you including that.
A good example of what I learned you could do with Surfer SEO a year ago is it can recommend internal links to make between your content, which is hugely valuable.
Yes.
Now I was just wishing it would hook into my WordPress back then, Webflow now, Framer, right, and just do it for me, because why not, right? I would absolutely give it permission to go edit my posts with that stuff.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys, we are finishing this up. I want to make sure that everybody connects with Evan on LinkedIn. Evan, obviously, the post that he made today was brilliant, but a lot of what he puts out is on this topic and super relevant. So make sure you follow him. Please hook up with me on LinkedIn if you have the chance. We have our next Juice webinar is happening on the 15th of October at noon. And then, of course, if you're not already going to the Juice to get content like this, the Juice is there. Make sure you sign up. So again, thank you, Evan, for being here. This was awesome. I am sure we could talk about 10 more topics. If you have the time, you just let me know and we'll get it scheduled.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Teresa.
Yep. Thank you. Bye, everybody.